Encryption management. Key management. Why do we have to worry about where the keys are? If they're public keys, why don't we care where they go?
Private keys.
Say again?
Don't care about the private keys.
You don't care as much about the public keys. You care a lot more about the private keys, right? And you need to manage that. Can anyone foresee a problem where all the private keys of an organization are kept in one file?
Yeah.
Why, Andy? What's wrong with that? It's convenient, isn't it?
Well, it's extremely convenient.
It makes distribution very easy, right?
Yeah.
So what's the problem?
Well, if somebody breaks in, they've got everyone, and they can pretend to be whoever they want to be, really.
Yes.
Easily.
You literally have the keys to the kingdom there, don't you? Mm-hmm. Good. And who should have access to recovering those keys? That's a difficult decision to make, too. XML, good infrastructure for doing it. It tells you how you're going to distribute and register them. It's got two distinct parts, the key information service spec and the key registration service spec. Operationally, how are you going to manage these things? In many organizations, and this was true in the military especially, we had a thing called TPI, two-person integrity. To get access to the place where the keys are kept, or anything for that matter that was extremely valuable, one person couldn't do it. You needed at least two people to access that thing. If it was a safe, there were two locks on it. If it was a combination, each person only had half of it. And what you'd like to do is get both dual control and split knowledge. What you would like in an ideal manner is to make sure that one person's access control is not dependent or related to another person's access control. Can anyone think of an example where that would be possible? How you would enforce that? If I have two locks on a safe, and one person's access control is a key, and the other person's access control is a combination. The two have nothing to do with each other. It's why you wouldn't break a key in half and each person has half the key. Does that make sense? Yeah, adds another layer of security to it. Do you want to automate your key generation? Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do. If your organization doesn't have the personnel with the skill set or know-how on distributing it or generating them, sometimes an automated tool is the way to go. The problem with that is, of course, now you have another point of failure that a knowledgeable intruder could exploit. Gregory, I told you we were going to talk about randomization before. We're talking about the difference between truly random and pseudo-random. What's truly random?
Anything that's random? That's actually random?
Okay. All right. Yes, sure.
Something that can't be predictable.
Something that's absolutely not predictable, right? The problem with that is computers aren't really good at that. Why not? Why not? We got random number generators, right? We have programs that will do this.
Well, they're based upon algorithms.
They're based upon math. Exactly. And is math ever random? It's not supposed to be. By design, it isn't. It's supposed to help decipher patterns, and it's supposed to create patterns. So we don't really have anything truly random. So what do random number generators do? How do we help them along in coming up with something that approaches truly random? What's a seed key?
They provide an initialization vector.
Good. Now what's the problem? If the computer is giving you an initialization vector, isn't that not random too? I mean, aren't we right back to the same problem again? Where do you get your IVs from?
As many places as possible.
Okay, good. What would be a good place to get an IV for a seed key for?
Clock cycles.
Clock cycles. Clock cycle.
On the processor.
On the processor. Why do those change? Are they variable? Are they random? Good.
I wouldn't say anything's really random.
Time of day.
Time of day.
Mouse movement.
Mouse movement.
Mouse movement's a good one. I've heard curtains blowing with the AC, mapping their their picture, mapping their graphic, and digitizing that. That's interesting. Static, music. Music's kind of not good because music is a pattern, right? What else?
Like waves.
Yeah.
Just random.
Yeah. I've heard water. Water's really good. I think someone was trying to use clouds, but that was a little more difficult. Good. Key length. Do you want to use the longest key possible? Perhaps, perhaps not. The longer you get, the slower you're going to get, obviously. Asymmetric, you necessarily have to be longer than the corresponding keys in the symmetric systems. We looked at that comparison earlier. To approach the same level of security, you need longer keys in asymmetric. What's key wrapping and key encrypting keys? What do we use this for? How does that work? What kind of device uses long-term special purpose session keys? Friend? We talked about one of these implementations earlier. What access control mechanism uses session keys?
Kerberos.
Kerberos. Good. Good. I think long-term throws us off a little bit. Long-term in this case doesn't mean enduring past a day necessarily. You're talking about long-term for the length of that session. Good. Good. Storing and changing them. If you protect your keys at a lesser security level than the data that the keys are designed to protect, you're not protecting the data, are you? That makes sense. The key, like we talked about digital certificates, should have an expiration date. There should be a point at which the key is no longer used for the same reasons. The freshness, I like that. Sort of a Tupperware effect there. That's good. Key recovery capabilities. Why do you need to be able to get keys back for your organization?
In case somebody loses it. So in case somebody loses it?
Yeah, in case somebody loses it, in case they forget it. Bad things happen. People get in car accidents, unfortunately. If you do have to get access to their data, you have to be able to recover it. People get fired. People leave in a hostile manner. You have to be able to get that back, right? Should that be easy? No, obviously not. You want to have that dual control there. You want to have that. You want to have split knowledge if you can. If it's being stored on your backups, you want to have the key. If your backup material is being encrypted, you want to have your keys backed up as well. What kind of problems are you going to face in encrypted backups?
If you lose the key?
Yeah, if you lose the key, if it's not with your backups and you're able to recover it, how long are your backups supposed to be good for?
Depends on the law.
Okay. If there's a law that says you have to back up, yes. Do you back up even if there's not regulatory compliance? Sometimes, depending on what your organization does. What's that?
Business needs.
Yeah, your business needs. Good. Your strategic alignment, right? Good. All right, so how long are you keeping these backups? Why are you backing up?
Recover.
To be able to recover. Jay?
In case of a disaster.
In case of a disaster. These are going to endure for a pretty significant amount of time. They might be stored for longer than the encryption was good for, honestly. You might not want to encrypt your backups simply because they might outlast the strength that you've stored them at. And then you've added another layer of process and another cumbersome process towards recovery as well. Also, if the recovery capabilities are diminished because you're trying to recover from a disaster, it might be hard to find the two people that were in charge of recovering them. They might have difficulty implementing their access control mechanisms to recover. They might have left the organization by that time. So, and one other problem. Now if you've stored the keys elsewhere, you have another vulnerability that an attacker could exploit to get access to your current data as well. All these things have to be considered. And you need to be able to get to them in a disaster. Who uses offsite storage for backups? Okay. Where is it physically?
Off-site.
Yeah. Out of sight, out of mind, right? Yeah. Do you know how far it is? Could you drive there?
Yes.
If you did drive there and you showed them your ID, would they let you in? What's their access control? Yeah. Yeah. Who would it be, do you think? Who's your backup?
Certain people in our organization.
Okay. And are they going to be available during disaster recovery?
They're always available.
They're always, of course they are. This is, oh man, we've got a whole module in disaster recovery, and
sure you will be.
This is the toughest one. Anyone ever exercised their disaster recovery procedures yet, including restoring from an offsite backup? How'd that go?
Pretty well.
Good. You had all the procedures all laid out ahead of time, and all the people knew their assignments and stuff.
Yeah.
How would it do during an actual disaster, do you think?
Depends.
Yeah. And that's really what it boils down to. I've been in organizations where they took their most sensitive materials and handed it to a driver who worked for that offsite firm. Not that that driver isn't licensed and bonded, but nobody knew if that driver was cleared to the level that that material was being stored at. Nobody actually knew where he was driving to. They figured once they had signed that contract that was enough of a security vehicle to be able, literally, a security contract, a security mechanism to take that material from one place to another. Your keys are going to be going to the same place. What do we mean when we say key deletion must be sanitized? Once a key's been expired, once it's been revoked, once somebody's left the organization, there has to be a way of going back and ensuring that everything that was already issued with that key has been documented. Why? Because if that key goes out into the wild, if somebody else can sign a document and backdate it, now you have no idea whether or not those documents were part of the original batch or not. What's the cost? Well, it can be significant. If you're running through all these processes every time somebody leaves the organization, that can be expensive. Sometimes you want to keep keys. Sometimes you want to recycle keys. Not a good idea, usually. Even if somebody changes their position when they're taking a new job within the organization and they have a different sensitivity, you still have to change the key to reflect that, usually. Recovering them. Different methods for recovering. A key wallet, it's storing all the keys in one place. Bad idea? Perhaps. You have to put more controls on the key wallet than you would on other files, including the keys themselves, because now you've aggregated them. Maybe you register them with the security department. They become the key holders, per se. Multi-party sealed envelopes is kind of fun. Everybody gets to participate. You give everybody a little bit of the knowledge. It gives them that split knowledge that we were talking about before. And they can't recover the whole thing. They only have their own little bit of it. What's the risk there? Not only responsible for protecting their own key and remembering their own key, now they got to remember where they stashed this envelope, right? Good. We talked about distributing keys. If you can, meet the person face-to-face to pass the key. Talk to them on the phone. Hold up a picture with the key on it over Skype, right? Figure out some way of getting that information to them other than sending it over that untrusted channel. PKI. We're going to talk about that. We're going to drill down on that. Talk about a way to distribute and catalog public keys. Key distribution center. You've got two keys, the secret and the session key. Kerberos, as we talked about, It's a good example of this. They've got a session key. Where is the secret key in the Kerberos setup? Who are the parties that share the key in the Kerberos implementation? The user and Kerberos service. Yeah, good. Then they issue the session key between the user and the service, user and the application. Good. For financial institutions, Matt, did you have to use ANSI X9.17?
Not particularly. I mean, we did, but not on.
Okay.
It was more in a transparent way than in a active way.
Okay. All right. You followed it, but you didn't necessarily set out to follow it?
It was implemented, and everything that ran was through implemented channels.
Okay. All right. There's a hierarchy. They have two different levels of keys, data keys and key encrypt and key masters. The standard allows you to add that other optional third tier if you want it. Did you use 3 tiers or 2? Remember?
Don't know how many they had.
Okay, good. PKI, public key infrastructure. You've got 3 main components of a PKI. The certificate authority, that's the entity that's going to sign the digital certificates, and it's validating that the certificate represents who the certificate says on it. What sort of information is on a certificate?
Who it was issued to, when it starts, when it ends.
Good. Name, date of issuance, date of revocation, or expiration.
The CA information.
Who the CA is. Sometimes it'll include information like the organization or the department or the domain that person belongs to in that certificate. Good. Registration authority, we talked about that a little earlier. We make sure that key is bound to the entity that the certificate says it is. How do they do that? They confirm it. They look up some other information to ensure that the CA is issuing a certificate for that actual user. The certificate revocation list, like we talked about, you want to make sure that that certificate has a particular shelf life, that it does expire at a certain point, that it doesn't stay in perpetuity, because there's too much risk associated with that. The CA should have that revocation list and publish it. In cross-certification, we allow CAs at a root level to validate each other's certificates. As long as they trust each other, all of their users should trust certificates that come from any of them. We talked about this before, where if I trust Matt and Matt trusts Gail, I can trust Gail. CAs are trying to do the same thing. This can be limited. Sometimes we don't want too many steps beyond a certain amount. If I trust Matt and Matt trusts Gail and Gail trusts Joan and Joan trusts Brent, I might not trust Brent. Not just because he's dodgy, okay, but because we've made too many steps. It's too far removed from my original trust. Does that make sense? Might also be based on the name. It might be based on what domain we're working in. If I'm in finance and Matt is in HR, even though we are using the same certificate authority, we still might not trust each other. But if we're far enough away, if I'm all the way from me to Brent and we do work in the same domain, maybe we will trust each other. And policy. Policy is trust built on how strong that bond is, how strong that CA is implementing their assurance level. For instance, what tools can be enforced by policy? Contracts, bonding, insurance, which evidently is hard to find. Warranties of the fact that they've done the physical checks, that they've had the RA actually go and do that research. That can be enforced by policy. The more policy enforcements you have, the more trust I might have as a user.